All right, let's get situated. Okay. Hey, team. Welcome back to another episode of the Jen Commandments podcast. I'm your host, Jen Wynn. I'm an engineer currently working in Wisconsin. I grew up in the Chicagoland area and I went to college in Michigan. Thank you for the support from last week. Very kind, very cool. Yeah, today, so this week was cool. Not a lot happened in the context of my human life. But I've been thinking about Wicked ever since I saw it. And I want to do a full episode about both Glinda and Elphaba. So if you saw the title, today is going to be about Galinda. And I wanted to tell the story of Wicked from her perspective. So this week is going to be long. My script for today is like 9.5 pages, where we see the movie from Elphaba's perspective. And so today I want to discuss Glinda's perspective. And as someone who self-identifies as someone who used to be very similar to Glinda, I wanted to talk about it. So I'm going to be reading from this most of today. I'll be honest. I will go on my own tangents, I'm sure, but we're prepped, so I want to honor that. I just want to give some pre-warnings before we discuss. I will be talking about the movie only. I have never seen Wicked as a stage performance, or I've never seen Wizard of Oz. And I know that's sort of blasphemous. But as a child, it had dark energy. Wizard of Oz has dark energy. And I was not able to finish it. Like I've probably seen the movie in its entirety, but never sat down and watched it in its entirety, if that makes sense. Like I would catch it when it was on, and maybe catch like half of it. So I'm privy to the legend that is Judy Garland, but that's about my extent of my knowledge about the Wizard of Oz. But I also know that the Wizard of Oz universe, like the universe that Wicked takes place in as well, is sort of like haunted. Like, I know that there have been traumatic sets for both the Wizard of Oz and the Wiz. They're just like anything associated with this seems to have been just like a little traumatic. So I'm interested to see if that's true for this movie as well. I hope not. But like I said, the movie has sort of dark energy, The Wizard of Oz, so it makes sense that that set was sort of traumatic. Before we can get into the analysis of Glinda, we have to first describe the movie and discuss the socio-political climate of Oz. I know how silly that sounds for like a musical, but it is a major. I feel like Oz is sort of its own character. Like there is so much exposition or just like knowledge that you need to know about Oz. And so I did come up with sort of a culmination or sort of just like a overview of Wicked. Or Oz. I said the socio-political climate of Oz is marked by deep divisions, inequity, and a tense power struggle. The ruling regime, represented by the Wizard, maintains control through propaganda, manipulation, and militaristic practices. The political structure is hierarchical. No, I don't know how to say that correctly, but you know what I'm talking about. There's the bitches at the top, the Wizard, and then there's everyone else. And then with the Wizard at the top maintaining authority by suppressing dissent and creating a culture of fear. The citizens of Oz are divided with the animals. They are sentient in this world, so it seems like there are animals that aren't sentient and there are animals that are, but we learn sort of throughout the movie that this is a reflection of maybe sort of the marginalization that they face. So there is a moment in Wicked where Dr. Dillamond, which is a professor that is a goat, we'll discuss later, but he has a moment where he balks, or whatever you want to call it, right? He makes goat noise. And it's meant to serve as like, oh, this is changing. Like, I'm becoming less human, I guess, where I'm not talking as much. So just something to mention. Also, I'm going to be talking about the first movie only. I have watched analyses of Wicked, whether it be from people who are very familiar with Wicked or what have you. So I might know some spoilers, but because I've only ever seen the movie and I've never seen the context for both acts, I won't be commenting on what happens in Act 2 just because I can't say. I haven't seen it with my own eyes. So yeah, if you don't want spoilers, I would probably skip until you watch Wicked. So, how does Galinda fit into all of this? Galinda comes from one of the richest parts of Oz. She is a direct symbol of privilege in the beginning of Wicked, and she is meant to serve as an opposite to the movie's protagonist, Elphaba. The first act of the movie sends me into a sob every time I watch it, or the first scene. We meet Glinda coming down in a bumble to let people of Oz know that the movie's protagonist, Elphaba, has been killed. And this is a very celebratory time for the people of Oz, as they've been led to believe that Elphaba is evil by their leader, the wizard. So, and we will get into that. Obviously, Wicked starts in in a scene that's in the future, and then the whole movie shows the context for that scene that is its trope, right? After this initial scene, we watch Elphaba and Galinda become best friends, but have to part ways when their ideas of how to enact political change force a rift in their friendship. This initial scene is so impactful to me because it truly represents the grief that comes with doing what's best for you. And no matter what, there are going to be times that you can't go back on your decisions, even the ones that you may make differently with the knowledge that you have now. But how do we attain that knowledge without making our past decisions, you know? How did Glinda become forced to be, quote, happy about her best friend's death? Good question. Let's get into it. So, Galinda enters Shiz University ready to make it her bitch, as I'm sure she's done in every room up to that point. Admittedly, I entered college the same way and went through a rude awakening the first couple of years. I think this is common amongst people who enter university, who might be from smaller towns or whatever. There's always going to be people who are better than you. There's always going to be people who are smarter than you. There's always going to be people who are richer than you. And there's always going to be people who are nicer, funnier, kinder, etc. Right? Anyway, she enters shit and immediately the whole student body is entranced by her. She immediately has groupies. She has her own private suites, and she doesn't have to adhere to the dress code. I don't know the context for why they don't have to follow the dress code, because both her and Elphaba don't follow the dress code. But I just know that they're the only two that don't, right? And so upon her arrival, she meets a young woman who's green, and this ends up being Elphaba. And her meet cute, or their meet cute, is definitely a moment. Elphaba is just walking in, so Elphaba is not supposed to be going to Shiz University. She's just there to help drop off her younger sister. who is paralyzed from the waist down. And so she's led to believe that, she needs extra help, whatever, right? Or she, like, her whole Elphaba, her whole life has felt guilty because she thinks it's her fault that Nessa Rose is that way. And we can discuss that during Elphaba's episode. But regardless, she's there to help drop off her little sister to college. And as soon as Glinda sees her, she's taken aback. And Elphaba doesn't say that she doesn't like being green. There's no indication from my perspective other than her defensiveness about being green that would indicate to me that this is something that she's ashamed of. But regardless, Glinda takes it upon herself to be like, well, someday when I am a sorceress, I will help you, I'll help you ungreen. And it's like, bitch, did anybody say that being green was a bad thing? But regardless. So that's sort of their first interaction. And Glinda just assumes that no one would be green if they had the choice. And then I also wrote in my notes, we love an enemies to lovers trope. um, so after this initial interaction, obviously Elphaba is uncomfortable. And when she's uncomfortable, weird stuff happens. Like things that she can't control and things that she can't explain to the common person, right? This is something that Elphaba has dealt with her whole life. Personally, I would say it's a symbol for reactive abuse, but that's up to your interpretation. And we can also talk about that during her episode. Regardless, when her emotions are high, they manifest into the world in ways that no one can explain. During the opening ceremony of the university, this magic manifests, and the president of Shiz witnesses this. Now, this is where we see Elphaba, the first time Elphaba is praised for her magic ever. Immediately, the headmistress, Madame Morble, she comes down. She had been just viewing her new students from a higher up corridor, and she witnesses this magic happen. So the resident person who was supposed to be helping Nessa Rose, she was like, I will help her myself, thinking that somebody who's paralyzed couldn't possibly navigate herself to her room, even though she's been paralyzed, her full 18 years or however old she is at this point. Because we infantilize people constantly. Anyway, so Elphaba notices this, and she's like, she doesn't need your help. Like, just allow me to like take her stuff. Allow me to assist her up to her room. Like, she doesn't need your help, bitch. I'm her sister. Fuck off, right? And when she's angry like this, she's the whole, like, she like brings up like benches and all sorts of shit. Like, go watch it. It's like, it's beautiful, and they made the set so practical. So they use very little CGI, and that's so obvious throughout the whole movie. And it's just, I hope that Universal does bring it to like Universal Studios, and like when they do the Universal tours, that people will be able to see like even like a little bit of Oz would be so cool. And I know people would pay so much money for it. I would hope that they would even bring like an Oz like world, like an Emerald City. I think that would be so cool. But that's just, fan shit. I'm getting off topic. So headmistress sees this, she comes down and she goes, that was me to expect the unexpected here at shit. Like, she totally like is like, I'm the magic bitch here. Don't think it's her, right? And then immediately Madame Morble goes and talks to Elphaba and is like, hey bitch, you're gonna attend here and you're gonna be a part of my personal class. I'm gonna teach you myself. And then Madame Morble, she starts to ask the class and be like, do any of you bitches want a room with her? And Galinda, being a pick-me-ass bitch, she's like, me, pick pick me, choose me, right? So and Petamorple's like, okay. And like Galinda doesn't even know what she's signing up for. Like she just whatever Madame Morble wants, she's willing to do. Because she entered as a former girl boss. I'm still sort of a girl boss, but like I'm recovering, you know. Um as a former girl boss, when you're entering college, bitch, you don't care what it is, you don't care. Like you want to further your career. At least that's how I was. And I see a lot of Galinda, like Galinda's a Capricorn. Like, duh, right? Not to be fucking annoying, but duh, right? Um so Galinda, she's like, yeah, I'll let this bitch room with me, even though I don't know that that's what I'm agreeing to right now. And then she's pissed because she's like, I don't want to room with that bitch. And like that's the whole tea. Um, before we move over, or before we move forward, let's unpack my perception of Galinda's character up to this point. I know that I've talked about it a little bit, but from my understanding, my apologies, Galinda is from the richest part of Shiz. She's from the uplands. She's never struggled to fit in socially, but it is because she conforms to what she thinks people want from her. She's more than willing to bend herself to be what people want from her, and she really relies on her social skills to get where she wants. However, it is obvious to us already that Galinda isn't confident in any part of herself outside of her likability. To me, this is obvious because of the extent in which Elphie makes her uncomfortable in these first few scenes. In my experience, when someone like Galinda is made to be uncomfortable by someone, it is because they are something that they aren't. If you think about it, Galinda was not used to sharing the spotlight with somebody. So, someone being green and exuding confidence around it would make her uncomfortable, as she has always taken everyone's perception of her into consideration when she combs through her personality, picking attributes to bring forward based on what the situation needs. Elphie doesn't do this, and frankly, Elphie doesn't bow down to Galinda the way most people do, which would be another reason why Galinda would be put off by Elphie's energy. It's foreign to her that someone isn't charmed by her, and because of this, she immediately seeks her approval, whether she consciously knows that or not. And that's on anxious attachment. um, that was a long bit for me to read through. But as somebody who grew up a lot like Glinda, and let's discuss that you may be the Galinda on your small hometown scale, but that doesn't mean you're Galinda on a widespread. Like so much, there's context missing, right? And if you notice that I only have 4 nails painted right now, anyway, um, so like I don't know, as somebody who grew up in a place of privilege as it relates to those around me, I highly identify with all this. I highly identify as somebody who learned to perform from a young age and learned that if I bring forward certain parts of me when a situation needs it, I'll get better results. And as somebody who desperately needed that attention as a child, I was more than willing to bend myself to get attention. So like that whole section that I just read, like a lot of when I titled the episode of A Defense of Galinda as a former, like a lot of my perceptions of Galinda are going to be shaped by my personal life experiences. So if there's ever times that you think I'm reaching and I might not have contextual evidence to support that, kindly, I want you to feel free to not voice your opinion about that, because that's my lived experience. And relax, maybe just stop listening or something, So anywho, um, so we talk about all that. So as soon as Elfie's like, girl, Galinda's like, but wait, now I want you to be my best friend. Because Galinda's not used to people not just adhering to or falling or swooning over that social intelligence. Like, most people are not that socially intelligent because most people don't observe social interactions that, like, as an 18-year-old entering college, lots of your peers are not going to be the most observant people, right? So if you meet another person whose survival has relied on observation the same way yours has, you're gonna be like, wait a fucking second, right? Like, that's sort of the point I'm making, and the perception of Glinda that I have thus far, and the perception of Glinda and Elphaba's relationship that I've had thus far, right? So the first few days are a struggle for them both. To save time, I will just be telling my perception of Glinda's point of view, right? We discussed that a little bit at the beginning of, if there are points of Wicked that I miss, it's because that Glinda's not a part of it, and therefore Glinda might not know, right? So, like, even as a spoiler, right, with what we're going to get into, even that moment where Elphaba and Fiero like go and try to save that cub, Glinda would have no idea in that moment. And so I'm not going to be discussing that plot point because it has nothing to do with her reality. It has nothing to do with her context, right? So, from Glinda's perspective, this new girl has come and showed her up within the first day. And listen, I'd be pissed. I would be like, I luckily Glinda is from a rich hometown. Like, she has plenty of back backing if anything were to go wrong. But like, as like, when I entered college, if somebody was better than me, like, I did not take it well at first. I was like, because I thought that you had to be the absolute best in order to get jobs, in order to, like, I was in it for me, babe. Like, I totally get her frustration, right? I also wrote that, like, Glenda's probably never experienced that before. Like, for example, if you're the smartest person in school, if you're the most athletic person in your school, if you're the most artistic, if you're the most popular, whatever, right? Whatever you think is your thing at your school, right? And then you go into the bigger pond, bitch. It's that, would you rather be a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond, right? Galinda's now a little fish in a big pond, and she's like, fuck, right? And I think when we judge, not that people are like genuinely judging Glinda, right? But this is fiction and I know that. But when people even want to judge like high schoolers, college students for not reacting the way that they think that they should, you have to remember here, like, I don't know at what age you go to college here in Oz, but like, at most, these people are supposed to be like 18 to 20, right? Like, they're not going to be the most rational fucking people. And that's something that I'll bring up later, of like, maybe things would be different if Glinda had been in school for like 2 or 3 years at this point. But this all happens within like their first semester, bro. Like, this is a quick fucking turnaround. Like, they enter college and then like shit pops off. Like, that's at least that's my perception of them. Like, I'm not sure the timeline, but that's my perception, right? So, yeah. So this is whatever. I appreciate this being included because blah 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 blah. Oftentimes, Students who go to college may be some, yeah, we talked about that. Oh, okay. This, I talked about when I talked about being maybe the smartest person in school or whatever. I also discussed this idea of the genius archetype. I watched a video on YouTube recently that was something along the lines of the male genius archetype needs to die or something. And it brought up people like Elon Musk. It brought up people like Kanye. And it was like we excuse so much behavior for the sake of somebody being so smart that we just don't get it. And I think that that is silly, right? And I think that Elphaba fell into that at first. Like they sort of fit her into that, but they still shamed her because she was a woman, right? Because if she was a genius archetype and Elphaba was a man, not to bring gender into this, but she would have been. Firo is a good example, right? Firo is not your typical student. He still is good socially, but like it's like he's different. He's also outside of the norm. So is Glinda, but they're seen as positive, where Elphaba's negative. And why is that? Why is that? Because they're white. Like there's a million reasons, right? But anyway, the archetype, the genius archetype, is bullshit, and it always has been. It's always been. You okay? You okay? You can't panic. That's part of it. Okay. Sorry about that. Bubby, he goes to daycare once a week. So, it is definitely possible that he could get kennel cough a little bit sometimes. So he just ran into that a little bit. But he is okay. Kennel cough is something I'm familiar with. And I know how to help it. So all is well. We were talking about the male genius archetype. Very cool perspective. The Definitely go look up that video. It is something along the lines of like the male genius archetype needs to die. Galinda is fully aware of that phenomenon. The genius, in my opinion, Galinda is very socially smart. I think that is her most important feature. Like she can navigate a social situation like no other person you've ever seen, right? So she knows about the genius archetype, and she knows that Elfie has been casted, right? And she wants to be that. She knows that she doesn't actually have to be the thing, but just represent the thing. Elfie is so intimidating to her because not only does she represent smartness, she represents magic, she represents all the things that Galinda wants to be and has been trying to be her whole life. Within the first day, Elfie has attained basically every goal that Galinda had at Shiz. She wanted to be taught in seminar by Madame Morble. She wanted to be acknowledged by Madame Morble that she's a talent. Like everything that Galinda came to Shiz for, Elfie did, and she wasn't even trying. She didn't even know that she was going to be attending Shiz. She just was, you know. There's news. Next, there's news that a rich, established man will be arriving soon to Shiz. And what you know about a rich, established man, especially one who's being played by Jonathan Bailey. Come on. In my mind, Galinda sees this as another opportunity to further her career. As a former girl boss, sure, it would be a pro that like Firo's hot and like it'd be good for your social standing, but like in my mind, she does some quick math. She goes, rich, established. And then she goes, me, rich, established. And then she goes, like it's an arranged marriage, right? Um, as, yep. I would love to do an episode about Firo. I think Firo is the not the most dynamic character. I wrote a 10-page script about Galinda just now. But I think Firo represents a lot of men. I think that he is the epitome of using his likeness and just relying on it. And if you're a little handsome man, truly, not to talk shit about men, but truly, if you're a man and you're like a little handsome, and you're not like, if you're not doing well for yourself, like, how? Because the world's created for you and you're handsome. Like, I just don't understand, but that's whatever, right? Galinda and Firo decide to do some welcome week shit. If you know, you know. And they sneak off campus to party at the pub, feeling insecure about her place at Shiz and being in an uncomfortable environment. Galinda is a bit more apt to do things that I don't think she usually would. And that's not to excuse what she's about to do, but I do think that she's already been feeling insecure, and she does something that's just to make herself feel better, I feel like. So okay. But I also have a theory that like the hat that Glinda gives Elphaba, she loves. Like, I, as somebody who also had a lot of clothes going to college, you have to pick what you're gonna bring. Like, I handpicked everything that I brought to college with me. And I think that she loves this hat. Her grandmother made it for her, but her friends, her groupies, were like, what is this hideous hat? And that's how they say it. Oz has funny saying sometimes. Hideous is one of them. They're like, what is this hideous hat, right? And she's like, oh, my Grammy made it for me. Like, you know how Grammys be, just full of love and wanting to give you shit. And they're like, ugh. And then as they're getting ready, she's like, but what if? And she gives that shit to Elphaba. Yeah, she does. She goes, this is just so pretty, and I think that it would look great with like your already terrible aesthetic. Like, she totally talks shit on Elphaba about her style. And then she's like, this would fit in. And then she invites her to the pub, right? It's called the Ozdas Ballroom. And we notice here also that every time a sentient animal is shown outside of Dr. Dillamond, which Dr. Dillamond is the goat professor that we mentioned, but every time that we see an animal outside of Dr. Dillamond, they're in a service role or like a blue or pink collar role, where they're either the talent they're performing at the Ozdas, they're the bartenders, they are the nurses and the nannies for Nessa Rose and Elphaba. Like, they are just always doing service roles. Like, they are seen as lower members of society. I just want to make sure that is told as well. And so she invites homegirl with a terrible hat. And to be fair, I don't think the hat's that terrible, but whatever. Right. And so before the Ozdust, Galinda gets Bach. Bach. You know how I said Bach earlier in relation to the goat? No, Bach is his name. She gets Bach to ask Nessa Rose. She's like, look at these two fucking nerds. What if they fucked each other? Right? Like, that's literally, she's like, I'm the nicest person ever. I got these fucking dweebs to suck and fuck, right? And so that's her whole MO. And then Nessa Rose and Elphaba are talking, and like Bach is in love with Galinda, obviously. Like, Bach is like, he's a shorty, right? That's number one. Bach is a shorty. And he gives, it's actually it's one of my favorite moments in the movie. Bach, after one of their little dance scenes, Bach goes up and like wipes her sweat with a little handkerchief, right? And then he goes, "Keep it. I cry. I have plenty. I cry a lot." And like, relatable. Yeah, as you should, King. Yeah, period, King. A man who's in touch with his emotions, he should get sucked and fucked. You know what I mean? Um, Fuck. Anywho, so that's what happens, right? Like, and then Nessa Rose is like, the only reason I'm having a good fucking day is because of Galinda, not because of your bitch ass. If you were a good sister, you would have had me helping me sucking and fucking Buck. And like, that's really Nessa Rose's MO. I'm not being like, that's not how it happens, but that's how it happened in my head, right? Nessa Rose is like, fuck you. You didn't help me fuck anyone. So Galinda's not on my shit list and you are. And so with that, Elphaba is like, all right, fine. Galinda helped my sister fuck someone, so that means that I should do something for her. And so she goes to Madame Morble and she goes, listen, bitch, if you don't allow Galinda to be up in our seminar with you and I, then I'm leaving. So then Madame Morble heads to the Ozdust, and immediately, once Galinda sees Madame Morble, she wants nothing to do with Firo. She's like, this is networking time. Like, do not ever come near me when I'm trying to network. And I so get that. Okay. When I was in Oregon, I dated this dude that I worked with. That's part of the trauma that happened in Oregon. Like, I dated somebody that I worked with, and like, while we were at work once, he like went to go in to like show me any sort of affection. And I said, get the fuck off of me. I'm at work right now. I am, and like, I'm a girl boss, bitch. Don't touch me at work. I am like, maybe if no one else is around, maybe then that's hot, but like, we were out in the open, like, dude, get the fuck away from me. And I like totally, because as women, we're not allowed to be two things at once. Like, if a man has like his family and wife and like he's nice to them, that's like cute or whatever. But like, as a woman, I can't let my peers see me in a way other than like being a callous, especially in that work environment. Like, that one specifically, it was already like a misogynistic space. And that was the last thing that I could have ever. The tea is like, I get this. She's like, get the fuck off of me. And Madame Morble comes up to her and she goes, here's a training wand. I have no faith in you. Frankly, I think you're a dumb bitch. But Elphaba was like, I am going to leave if you don't allow her to be a part of this. And immediately, Galinda's like, right? Because Madame Morble lets her know that Elphaba's here, and she's gonna start making her way in here soon. And Galinda's like, fuck, right? Because she set that bitch up for failure, and she did it because she was a bad person. And like, and listen, she's not a bad person all the time. In that moment, she was being a bad person. And she knows that. She knows that like she did something slimy and snotty, right? And so yeah, I don't know. Galinda does some quick math. Okay. Before we step into the Ozdust, I want to go back to her deciding that she was going to give her the hat. I want to take it like a step further to analyze why Galinda knew to do that quick math. Like Galinda, her thought process to give Elphaba that hat was, this is an ugly hat. I could further my career and make Elphaba look sort of silly if I gave it to her and had her go to the Ozdust, and then people I obviously don't think that Galinda thought that the whole Ozdust ballroom was gonna giggle in our face, because that's fucked up, right? Like, the fact that the Ozians did that shit is mad fucked, right? But I do think that she was operating under this anything to succeed mindset. And I want to take it a step further and analyze maybe why she had that to begin with, because that doesn't come out of thin air. You don't learn how to undermine people like that by not seeing it first or have it happen to you first. And I think, to me, this indicates that she's seen this behavior from others. Possibly her family members may have acted that way towards her, or she's witnessed it within her family's wealth management. Like, and not to analyze, we've analyzed a little bit in that Saltburn episode about like wealth and how both sides view each other, how like the poor view the wealthy and how the wealthy view the poor. And like, this could just be me viewing the wealthy that way, right? But like, especially if you come from a place like Upland, where in my head, Upland is like the Upper East Side. Like, it is the rich of the rich in New York. Like, you see people doing slimy things, not all the time, but I feel like you've seen it happen, right? And so I want to just implore you to think about that when you think about that, like that thought process of like, well, how did she know? Right? Like, just feel a little empathy for her in that way. So I wrote, if she's seen people she's supposed to respect act that way, and I wrote in parentheses, this aligns with the socio-political message of the movie, then she also simply may not have seen it as an issue to step on somebody for personal gain. This commentary, the commentary that the movie makes about the effects of power imbalance on a widespread scale suggests that this would just be seen as business as usual or a part of the game. And we'll get into the game a little bit later when we talk about defying gravity. We're going to talk about that social game and that learning from a young age how to play the game, even if you don't know that the game is inherently bad, right? You're just trying to survive. You get yourself to the top by any means necessary, right? So homegirl gives her the hat. Elphaba goes and does something nice, and then Galinda's like, fuck, right? And in my head, Galinda's not just like, fuck, because she then realizes she did the wrong thing. She's also like, fuck, because she knows that if other people were to find out that Galinda did this purposefully to make her look, remember, she cares about the perception of her way more than she cares about actually being good at this point. And so it's my opinion that she cares sort of more about the fact that it could get out. Obviously, she cares about Elphaba, and they went the whole night, and they had this whole big thing where they become best friends. But it's both. It has to be. There's a no universe. There's a no universe. Sorry, I just almost did it twice. That Galinda doesn't do this social math, in my opinion, because she's done social math twice now up to this point. And so it's my opinion that this is another example of that. So Galinda goes and tries to find Elphaba to get her to take that fucking hideous hat off before she gets laughed at, right? And it's too late. She's walking in and people are no less than like pointing and staring at her. Like, they really make it so you feel embarrassed. right? Like, you're not the one in the position, but you watch that scene and you're like, well, sir, like, you really feel it, you know? I think Cynthia does a breathtaking job. Um, so yeah. Anyway, anyway, um, she turns the corner and it's already begun. The masses are exuding major hater energy at the function towards Elphaba. Who wrote this? I'm sorry. They're laughing, pointing, and making space around her like she's a disease. Like she's got the fucking coronavirus, bitch. Like they're really clowning her over that hat. Um, but I also think that this is, in it of itself, I think this is a commentary about authoritarian culture, because the othering of people is so, like, important to authoritarian culture that, of course, they are going to act like that. They are under a tight regime where people are strict about who you are and whether you fit in, right? Like, animals who used to be widely accepted are now seen as bad guys. So, of course, they're going to other her, right? That's just a part of their Aussian culture. Um, and suddenly, Alpha, Alpha sort of starts to play into it. I think she goes, bet. You want to see funny, bitch? I'll show you funny, right? She starts to dance in a very jerky and swift manner, moving quickly and unpredictably. In my perspective, Galinda's first instinct is to be angry at Elphaba for this. And we'll get into that. But up to this point, every time Elphaba has made a spectacle of herself in any way, Galinda sees that as shameful. She's like, why doesn't she know? Why doesn't Elphaba know that if she just conforms to what they want her to be, that she'll fit in? And like, Galinda just can't understand why somebody would make more of a spectacle of themselves if it wasn't positive, right? Because she only wants attention if it's positive. She does not want negative attention. So then Galinda's baby daddy, Fiero, is impressed. He's like, she don't give a fuck about what anyone thinks of her. That's a bad bitch, right? That's a bad bitch, though. All right. So her baby daddy, Fiero, sorry, this prepping for this episode was so scary because I was like, this is so long. And if it's boring, I'm sorry. But this is wildly interesting to me. So, baby daddy Fiero is like, damn, shorty don't care about what nobody think, right? That's for real what, like, that's how Fiero feels about Elphaba. And I think that Galinda and Fiero are sort of mirrors of each other. They're really, of course, right? Like, they are supposed to be very similar. They're supposed to play similar roles. And this sort of sends Galinda over the edge because her baby daddy is glorifying somebody that isn't her for things that she can't do. Well, that she hasn't been able to show herself that she can do up to this point, which is stand on her own even when people are against you, right? And she immediately decides that she's going to begrudgingly, also vulnerably, join Elphaba. And this is the most important moment of the whole movie, in my opinion. This is where Elphaba and Galinda see each other for the first time. I'm gonna cry thinking about it. Galinda does something that she would never do for anyone else because she stood up for Galinda, and Galinda failed Elphaba. Galinda failed to have positive motives regardless how somebody treats you, or regardless what somebody represents to you or who they are to you. And in a lot of ways, that's a moment where Galinda showed her true colors in a way that's not positive. And instead of letting the world know that, Elphaba just sits there with her and says, I know what you did, and you're making up for it now. And that's enough. Like, you don't have to be shamed about it. I see you, and I know what you did, but you care about somebody who I love, which is my sister, from Elphaba's perspective. Elphaba didn't care. She said, you did something that for someone I love, that's enough. You can shame me, that's fine. And Galinda, for the first time, was like, no, that's not enough. You deserve more than that. And gives it to her. And I think this is the first time that probably Elphaba also has received that sort of attention. And I wrote in my notes that I think that they probably both fell just a little bit in love with each other in this moment. How wouldn't you? You know, you have two people who have probably never truly been seen by their peers before or seen by their caretakers, you know? And in that moment, for better, for worse, they're being seen by each other. And they go home and then they're besties, right? They have like a night where they've decided that they're best friends now. So, okay, I also wrote in here that they give major girl friendship that ends weirdly because there was a layer of underlying romantic chemistry the whole time. Major. Anyway, Galinda decides that Elphie is going to be her new bestie, confidant, and sister. They form a pretty codependent relationship from here on out as they balance each other out. And I feel like they really do. And they don't really know how to harness their power without each other in a lot of ways, you know? It is the things that Galinda helps Elphaba be confident in that helps her with her magic. It helps her feel ready to go to the Emerald City. And it is Elphaba's undying need for the right thing to happen that inspires Galinda to always do the right thing, whether it's going to benefit her or not. You know, one of the things that Galinda is already a bit frustrated with before they even become friends is Elphaba's position in class. They go to a class, they have this class together with the only animal professor left. During the scene where Elphaba causes magic during like the first day ceremony, we get to see a mural that's since gotten covered up that is showing animals and humans and everyone getting along. And animals used to have like a much higher regard in this universe. And now we're seeing that this is sort of the common enemy of Oz and how animals are being pushed out of their place in Oz. And if you remember, if you've seen this movie, Glinda was from the richest part of Oz. And likely she's heard about all of the violent things that were happening to the animals with little context or little relation to any real animals. So she likely has been hearing about animals on the news or what have you, and may not even know an animal herself, a sentient animal herself. She can empathize that this has happened and it was bad, but under the wizard's leadership, she was also led to believe that they were dangerous and may have deserved that marginalization. I think something that happens in this universe a lot is we have friends and family members, especially if you're white, who live in rural areas, who may have never really even interacted with a person of color, judging them, and saying things that are false, right? This is a direct symbol for racism or prejudice in any way. This is a direct commentary on how the United States views anyone who isn't white or cisgendered or heteronormative. Many of those who live outside of a city or its metro area are only given the context of people of color through mass media, whether that be history books or the news. And guess what you hear most frequently about highly diverse cities like Chicago? You hear about how dangerous they are. This is also how Galinda probably has been brought up, if I had to guess. Now, this is not an excuse for this behavior, but unfortunately, Galinda is a victim to the political propaganda that she has been the target audience for. Nobody is the target audience for racist media than white folks who watch Fox News. Like, that is the target audience, right? The governing party always knows the correct dog whistle and when to blow them. TikTok showing that propaganda ass message when they gave TikTok back is another example of this today. Gen Z is definitely the target audience for this, and just like that little $2,000 back in 2020, it will be enough for many people to be won over. That's why that message was shown on every phone that still had TikTok in America. Anyway, while Galinda and Elphaba are in this animal professor's class together, Galinda is hard on him, Dr. Dillamond, telling him that she wishes he would move on from the past and gets angry when he cannot pronounce her name correctly. I think this is such an important inclusion, again, in a work that is partially representing the college experience. There are so many layers of relevancy, but the main one that I want to discuss, that college is such a learning experience for socialization. There's a lot of things that you learn in college, but to me, to learn how to socialize with people who don't look like you, to learn how to socialize with people who are from different walks of life than you, is the most important lesson that you get from college. So, with this, there are going to be times that anyone, including Galinda, will say things simply because those who she's perceived as wise up to this point have. Because again, she's looking to impress those around you, right? So up to this point, maybe the people that she respected, like her parents or her close family members or the people that she deems respectable, have said things that are maybe off, that she doesn't know are off yet because she hasn't been out in the world long enough to make those realizations on her own. Mind you, we've been in college for maybe 3 weeks at this point in the movie, right? Galinda is serving what we know in this universe as microaggressions. And that's not to say that it was intentional, but they for sure were. Nitpicking a professor for their accent and telling him, an animal that is a part of a marginalized group, that she simply doesn't understand why he can't pronounce her name is microaggressive. Telling anyone that they should just move on from their and their family's trauma is microaggressive. However, because there are only Elphaba and Dr. Dillamond that are truly a part of said marginalized groups, no one else sticks up for them, and Galinda is seen as being right. This goes so far that Dr. Dillamond is fired, and Shiz lets the students know that animals will be kept in cages moving forward. This is directly after a hate crime against Dr. Dillamond, and we witness Elphaba speaking with him and other animals about the prejudice that they've been facing. So, I think before we get into the rest of the story, we dive into some of the context we are given about the sentient animals that we've just witnessed get enslaved. When Elphaba accidentally uses her magic during the first day of Shiz, we are shown that there used to be animals included in the decor and murals at Shiz. I mentioned that a little bit, but there used to be peace amongst all races and types of the citizens in Oz, and then there was a mass rejection of animal cruelty or animal culture, my apologies, within Oz. So what brings people wanting a common enemy? you may ask, right? And when people want a common enemy the most is when they're all going through things, whether that be economic strife. In this context, it was drought. But whenever the mass collective is going through something, they're going to look through maybe inflation. And they're always going to look for somebody to blame for that, right? And the animals were the easy target. They were people who were already in those service roles. They were people who society may have already slightly looked down upon. They were clearly different. It was the othering of animals. And yeah, animals were the easy target. Additionally, when Elphie talked to Madame Morble about the hate crime that they experienced, so in one of their first days of class, Dr. Dillerman tries to teach them about the history and the rejection of animal culture. And when he tries to show them a map that is on the other side of the chalkboard, it says on the chalkboard that animals should be seen and not heard. And this obviously frazzles Dr. Dillerman. And I initially didn't include it in here because I didn't want to talk, like, it's uncomfortable to talk about marginalization. It's even in a fictional world, it's uncomfortable because it applies to real life, and as a white woman, it's scary to talk about. But I don't think it is either. And so we should talk about those things. And so, anywho, and yeah, I don't know. It's just it's a good. We should talk about bad things that happen, even if the people that we identify with could be responsible for them, right? Um. However, at this point, Galinda doesn't know much of any of this, right? From Galinda's perspective, we see it in the movie, but just because the audience has that context doesn't mean the character in the movie does, right? Um, she doesn't know the warning signs of targeted discrimination, even if she's been a perpetrator of it, because she's never been in an environment where it's been explicit enough that she hasn't witnessed by the citizens of Upland for her to notice. Likely, she may have been hearing about how the animals were inherently dangerous. Even if she doesn't think she feels that way, she might, right? Because that's another part of your implicit bias, right? Even if Galinda didn't explicitly have those negative, nasty feelings for Dr. Dillerman, it was clear that she had underlying feelings because she nitpicked him. She harped, she harped on how he couldn't let go of the past. Like, she was very strict on him. And so obviously we can see that that might be how she feels, even if it's not conscious, right? I think this brings up an interesting point about prejudice and racism that we don't talk about enough. I think when you're younger and grow up in a white household, and while you're still in the phase where you're not aware that your trusted guardians, it doesn't just have to be your parents, have been influencing your thoughts and feelings for a long time, you think because you know racism is bad that you're not racist, right? For a long time, I think that we navigate through that, right? We're like, okay, well, we've been taught about slavery, we've been taught about the Trail of Tears, like, we're taught about racism, right? And so in theory, you're like, okay, racism equals bad, me equals good, and therefore they can't be equal, right? Like, that's how your fucking monkey brain thinks through it, right? And so if I had to make some assumptions about the way that Galinda was raised, I would guess that this is the insight on racism that she has going into college. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of white folks think that have these insights on racism going into adulthood. I think most white people have this insight on racism going into adulthood. Whether or not you unpack that later and sort of face your implicit biases or not is a whole other story. And like sort of how we get to a Big Daddy T situation, right? But let's continue in Oz before I spiral in this universe, right? So the point is it's not surprising that Galinda has some off opinions as it relates to social justice, right? She's always held the most power in her current social standing, right? So why would she think about racism? Why would she think it's something that she needs to have a real opinion on, right? So back in the classroom where Dr. Dillamond has just been told he will no longer be teaching at Shiz. That's where we were at, right? Galinda can tell that this is vastly upsetting to Elphaba, right? And if we know the context of Galinda, she's already been upset with Elphaba for acting out too quickly. And so I just lost my voice. So Galinda, okay, in this, Galinda is trying to calm Elphaba down before she acts out of character and before she acts out of anger and she does something irrational, right? And obviously, as we know, when Elphaba gets angry, shit's about to pop off. And so she accidentally puts her whole she makes all of her classmates and all of the teachers and whatnot pass out except for her and Fiero, and they go save the lion cub that had just been brought in for showing, like show and tell, right? So they just escaped and humped the lion, and then so while this is happening, while they're out and about saving the lion cub, Madame Warble is like, all right, I can't control this bitch anymore. This bitch has gotten too big for me. She's in way more control of her power than I ever have been. And so I can't control her, right? So she decides that she is going to call up the wizard and be like, come get this bitch, right? And he does. He sends a little flying, whatchamacallit, an invitation and whatever, right? So when she writes to the wizard and that thingy comes back, Galinda, you can tell, is very excited for Elphaba. She's very proud of Elphaba, and she's also devastated that it's not her. She's like, I want to be the star student so bad. I'm so pissed off that it's not me. Whatever. This may be one of the first real times that Galinda has to face rejection in this way. And I think she handles it the best she can. Truly, I think she does a decent job. She does better than I probably would have, you know? She tries not to make it about herself. She dresses like Elfie for her send-off, and she declares that moving forward, she will be known as Glinda. In order to support Dr. Dillamond. So Dr. Dillamond could not pronounce the G because he'd be like, bah, you know what I mean? So instead of being Galinda, she's just going to be Glinda. Okay? She wants to be perceived as good with a sort of empty gesture, not really sacrificing anything. I love the inclusion of this for Galinda's character because, as we discussed last week, I think this is something that may be common for people who feel like people are looking to them to do the right thing. Galinda has been popular her whole life, so she knows that people are looking to her for either guidance or an opinion. Social math, as we've discussed plenty so far. This is something that is important to her best friend, right? So she feels it's important to support her and likes the benefit of looking like she cares about social justice, right? However, because she doesn't truly have any stakes in the matter, she provides something that doesn't really help, just the illusion of help. We see this often in our universe with social media, the news, etc. I like to call it the thoughts and prayers effect. It can also be perceived as commentary of white people centering themselves in all issues, creating solutions of things that don't actually help who it's trying to. I also view this a lot as white feminism. Um, there is a lot of community commentary about how white women do not view feminism as intersectionality or intersectionally, or I don't know how to say it correctly, but they just view their issues as and their solutions as the solution in feminist issues. And I'm glad that this got included, right? Like, she does something, eh, who gives a fuck? Okay, Glinda, who gives a fuck, you know? Um while the train is taking off, Elphaba asks Galinda to come with her, and she decides to. Together, they get to Oz and explore the city together. Um, they get their nails done, they check out the sights, and they get ready to meet the wizard together. This is obviously one of my favorite parts of the movie. It is one of the happiest parts of the movie. And I think it's such a great representation of what the hope is. Uh, the hope of life is before you get into the real world. um, like, it's like wanting to be an adult when you're a kid. You know, you're like, I can do whatever I want. I could eat ice cream for breakfast. And then, like, 10 years later, you're crying, eating ice cream for breakfast, and you're like sad about it. So while the train is taking off, Elphaba asks Glinda to come with her, whatever. They go together. I really have such a complicated relationship with my feelings as it relates to working within the system or working outside of the system. It's something that I have no idea, even still, like, as it relates to activism, as it relates to whatever. This movie is a good commentary of, like, there might not be a right answer. Like, but anyway, so they check out the sights together, right? They're so hopeful, so happy. And then they get ready to go see the wizard. And when they do see the wizard, it ends up just being a guy, right? But beforehand, Glinda gives Elfie one last "you can do anything" pep talk. And it's beautiful. And truly, you can sense how much Elfie has needed that love and attention her whole life. Every time Galinda gives her words of affirmation, you can just feel how much she needed it. Once they're in there, Elphaba realizes she's the only one there with real power. What's that Meg the Stallion lyric? Um, what is it? Y'all want to talk uh y'all want to talk numbers because you can't talk talent. That's Elphaba right now. um that's her, right? um this doesn't surprise Glinda as much, as I'm sure she's been around powerful people before, maybe even the wizard, being that she's from Upland. Also, Galinda is already aware that being social gets you where you want to go. So I think Glinda saw a lot of herself in the wizard. Also, though, that means that she's not realizing the governing entity isn't truly there for the betterment of everyone, truly, regardless of what they look like. Elphaba is the one that's learning that for the first time. Elphaba was living under the guise that if she just worked hard enough, she would be able to change the world and make it a better place. And although that is the most important part of this scene, we will be discussing that next week. It's my opinion that Galinda never saw the governing body as this magical being, as she's familiar with many of the same privileges that those who live in Emerald City have. That's why she's not utterly shocked when she finds out that the wizard has no real power. However, when Elphaba made this realization, she was not as level-headed about the interaction. Realizing she's the only one with true power here, Elphaba runs off with this pseudo-Bible that they have called the Grimoire, as she's the only one that can truly read from it and cast spells from it. While this is taking place, Galinda runs after her. We can't say for sure what her motivation is at this point, but it's obvious that she's also frustrated with Elphaba. She immediately knows that any move Elphaba makes right now could change whether they're considered for treason or not. I think that Galinda does not live under any sort of unrealistic expectation of what the government is. I think she's very aware that the government's going to do whatever they need to do in order to create the narrative that they want. I think Galinda is very aware of that because Galinda's been doing that with herself and with those around her whole life. She's very familiar with creating narratives and pushing them, right? And she's very aware of the fact that that's what you have to do, and that's what the governing party or the governing party does. And I think more than anything, Galinda wants to protect her friend by having her conform into her world. I think at this point, Galinda is like, the only way right this second that we're going to be okay is if you turn into me, right? That's the way that this is going to work right now. And obviously, Elphaba's like, fuck all that, right? I think this aligns with Popular, the song, and she selfishly doesn't want to see Elphaba's point of view at this moment. So the lyrics of as the audience, we're let know that Galinda knows this already, right? Because in the lyrics of Popular, they are, when I see depressing creatures with unpossessing features, I remind them on their own behalf to think of celebrated heads of state or especially great communicators. Did they have brains or knowledge? Don't make me laugh. They were popular. It's all about popular. It's not about aptitude. It's the way you're viewed. So very shrewd to be very, very popular like me. So these lyrics, right? She's like, hey, bitch, I know that these people aren't smarter than me. I know that they're not especially great communicators. Bitch, they're popular. They know how to interact. They know how to be likable. And that's how they are where they are. And at the time when Popular was saying, Elphaba couldn't internalize that because she was just being told at the time that like who she wasn't good enough. She wasn't told why. She just was told, hey, what you are is not what's going to get us where we need to be. That to me, that's the magic of this musical. It is shown in Popular that Galinda has had an idea of just how untalented those who get into positions of power are. They have simply been able to play the social game in life, right? Unfortunately, though, Elphaba is not hearing that part of Popular, like I said, right? She's only hearing that Galinda would like her to change. And that's understandable, right? In my opinion, this is Galinda's biggest downfall. She didn't know how to communicate why she perceives these changes need to be made in a way for Elphie to not feel like she's the issue, not the system that she's trying to fit into, right? Because obviously Galinda was like 18, right? And I'm gonna talk about that. Galinda's like 18 years old, right? So she's like, hey, I know that the best way that I've been able to just survive in Oz up to this point has been X, Y, and Z. And so in order for you to be successful in Oz, bitch, I want you to do it too. She didn't communicate it like that. She communicated it in like a, I'm gonna fix you type of way. And I don't think even at the time Galinda knew that was what she was trying to help her survive. She wasn't trying to help her be popular, right? I said, if I want to be fair to Galinda, I don't think she even understood that, right? We talked about that. Now, this is the part of the podcast where I truly project myself onto her. as I will be fully defending her from my perspective that I can see based on my lived experiences. So like I said before, if you think it's crazy, feel free to not share your opinion about it, right? If I had to guess, Glinda had to learn how to play the game from a very young age because it was likely the only way that she received positive attention. From a young age, she learned that by performing what the world wanted her to be, she frequently got what she wanted, and because of it, success had always been seen as the top priority in the family, right? So from a young age, she learned how to play the game for self-preservation, to get the attention that every child needs and the likability of her peers. So now, in this moment where Elphaba is trying to take the Grimoire, trying to make herself powerful and give herself wings so she can defy gravity, we're given this thesis statement of this movie, right? We're given, is something good or moral just because it's popular, right? If I had to guess, Galinda didn't know when she was learning how to adapt her personality for survival that those same coping mechanisms would be used against her and her best friend by the governing body, which is something she quickly learns in this moment of defying gravity. At first, she is frustrated with Elfie that she can never just keep her head on straight long enough to hear people out, where Elphaba's lived experience have taught her to identify patterns quickly and know when it's time to go. Galinda's instinct during the altercation with the wizard is to go with Elphaba, as she knows that ultimately it's the right thing to do. In fact, they show her fighting off guards while they're trying to make an escape from the Capitol building. Or I don't know what it's supposed to be called, but in my head, it's the Capitol building. In my head, it's the White House, right? It is once she is given a second to think it through that she decides not to escape with her. I think that there are many reasons for this. The most superficial being that she's on the governing body's side and wants to hear them out before making any rash decisions. However, I think it's a lot deeper than that. This is the only reality that Galinda has ever lived in. She's only ever lived in a bubble of privilege. I'm not trying to be corny. I didn't mean to say bubble of privilege, even though she comes down in a bubble. You know, that one Vine or whatever video that is. I actually haven't watched it since I've watched that movie, and it's one of my favorite all-time favorite videos on the internet, and I don't think she's right, or that dude's right anymore. I actually don't know. I'll have to rewatch it. She came down in a bubble, bro! Anyway, she's only ever lived in a bubble of privilege that she's born into, and she's always known that her destiny is to help from within, as it's always served her to do so. Because truly, there is a universe where they both could have stayed and helped from the inside. Okay, there is a universe where Elphaba keeps her shit together and she argues for the good of the animals with the wizard. There is a universe where that happens. I don't think that it's hard, right? Because even as somebody who wants to get into local politics, how do I become involved with the entity that harms, you know? And but how else do you change it, you know? And this whole movie represents that in a lot of ways. How do you navigate that, you know? I truly believe Glinda understood her path and tried to fit Elfie into it instead of seeing that once Elfie understood everything, she would never work with the wizard. I think that Glinda really tried to fit Elfie into her life instead of understanding Elphaba for who she was. Granted, they're 18, right? And that's hard, right? We always do that. We do that with everyone we love. We want them to be what we want them to be and not who they are. Or we're never honest about the people we love. And that's one of the I think that's one of the hardest things that you can do for somebody that you love is be honest about who they are and love them regardless, or love them correctly, and discuss with them how to love them correctly. Because when we just assume how we're supposed to support our people, it doesn't end up working out all the time, does it? Right? Like this, right? She's like, I want to, my lived experience, Galinda is like, my lived experience have led me to want to make you conform so that I can protect you. Just conform. So I can fix it from there. Just shut up. Right. And Elphaba's like, girl, I would never even want to be a part of this world. I could never be a part of a world that does this, right? And that's sort of what they're battling in this moment. Once she understands this and how staying may not benefit Elfie the same way it benefits her, she tries to show support to her in the ways that she can. And she allows her space to defy gravity, knowing that she is endlessly indebted to the wizard by staying with all that she's witnessed. She looks at Elphaba and she goes, I see you for what you need to do, and I see me for what I need to do, and the best way that I can love you right now is to let you do it, you know? And Elfie understands the same for her. She goes, I get it. And they're no longer angry with each other. And Galinda allows her to defy gravity while also understanding that the only way that she can protect Elfie now is from the inside. And I think in that moment, she understands that that's going to be her new mission. It's no longer all of the things that she dreamed at Shiz. It's no longer to be Madame Morble's protege. It is to control what she can control from the inside, right? She's never been in an opposition to the governing body, so she knows she'll be accepted, but she also has this newfound perspective in the back of her head. If we follow with the idea that she's been good at social math, she may even feel more comforted knowing that she could help control the narrative of her best friend. She stays and becomes a propaganda pusher for the wizard, which is how we come back to the first scene of the movie, her telling the Munchkins that the Wicked Witch of the West is dead. Now, I've heard a few things about Act 2, but because I've never seen it or read it, I don't think I'm going to comment on it right now. I think that feels a little crazy. Maybe after For Good comes out, I'll do like an updated episode. But this is about the extent of my knowledge of Galinda up to this point. I think it's easy to become Galinda if you've had no diversity of life experiences, cultures, or the like in your social circles. Even when I did, it still took me years to perform or to figure out how to navigate my moral compass and still have that innate desire to perform for those around me. I think because it's been ingrained in me since I was little to perform for people, I don't think that desire is ever going to go away. I'm still going to chase a giggle. I'm still going to chase pleasing people. But we have to remember in this story that Galinda is college age, likely 18 to 20. And although we think we're adults at that age, it will take another 5 to 10 years before she truly stops developing. So there's still plenty of opportunity for growth for Galinda. Unfortunately, the same system that allowed Galinda to live in innocence is the same one that forced Elfie to grow up early. So their reactions to the same things would be vastly different. Is there another world where Galinda goes with her? In her current state, no. I think if they had been in the school longer and Galinda had more of an opportunity to see the governing body for what it is, maybe. Galinda was still unaware of how corrupt it was, so I truly think it's her time as Galinda the Good that radicalizes her. She gets a front row seat of the bullshit, you know? Unfortunately, I think this happens frequently. Sometimes by the time we learn the right lesson, it's too late to go back on the decision that we've made. So instead, we just move forward with the new found perspective and do what we can to fix the things that we have control of, right? Um, we see this with Galinda trying to give the Munchkins some perspective about who Elfie was in the first scene. She's trying to show the truth about her friend while performing the lie that she's been blackmailed into, you know? So is that enough? Is it enough to learn the lesson, even if it's too late? I guess that's something you'll have to navigate in your own life, you know? That's all I've got about Glinda. um, Next week we're gonna dive into Elfie. If you've made it through, comment some pink hearts on YouTube or rate it 5 stars on whatever podcast platform you listen to. That's it. Thank you for listening. Have a good week. I love you very much. Wash your face. Drink some water. Um, you know, you know the vibes. Okay. All right.